At a time when people tear down historic statues in other parts of the world, the Scots are creating new historic statues, presumably for future generations to tear down. As a Glaswegian, of course, I am obliged to disparage Edinburgh. Being an historian rather than an economist, I've actually read The Wealth of Nations. And this is an extraordinary passage in Book 1, Chapter 9 about China. Smith's central argument here is that if you change the laws and institutions, and in particular, if you introduced trade, free trade in particular, to China, you would have quite different outcomes. You would very likely have rapid growth. Policy changes in China after the 1970s proved Smith right. It was as if Smith saw modernity coming and realized all the mistakes that we would make in it. What matters in the end is not whether you're socialist or capitalist. That, I think, has become a false dichotomy. What really matters is whether you have the rule of law.
I was brought up in the town in which Adam Smith was born and lived, Kirkcaldy. I think Adam Smith was a brilliant economist and a brilliant moral philosopher, but I think every economist and every moral philosopher are creatures of the times. And I think we learned two things from Adam Smith, but it points to what we haven't learned as well. The first is he understood the importance of trade. And he understood, therefore, the importance of the division of labour and the specialisation of labour. And that is absolutely central to the wealth of nations. He didn't understand the importance of innovation. You should be thinking of what is going to lead to greater productivity in your economy. And of course, the rate of productivity and growth, people call it a productivity puzzle in Britain. It's not really a puzzle in the sense it cannot be understood. It's not a mystery. It's a failure to invest in innovation and a failure to invest in education. And we've got to discuss the proper balance between the public and the private sector in doing this.
The world has changed a lot. In Smith's day, Smith wrote about a pin factory famously in the introduction to The Wealth of Nations. And really for the 2 centuries that followed, large business was very principally concerned with repetitive, linear manufacturing processes, of which making a pin is a rather silly and banal example. But in the end, when you have Ford and General Motors assembly lines, still linear, still repetitive. Business isn't like that anymore.
People will become more frustrated about the economic prospects of their children and more frustrated about their own failure to do better.
Nativism on immigration, we have to restrict immigration. Backlash against free trade, we have to impose tariffs. Attacks on corrupt elites, these terrible people who run the place have to go, and the outsiders come to the fore politically. This is the standard formula for populism. Populism is fundamentally about economic policies changing. It is about tariffs. It is about restricting migration. Populism is quite different from fascism, and it's a category error to use these terms interchangeably.
If we take the great businesses of the world today, we're talking about Amazon and Apple and Microsoft. They're not engaged in repetitive production.
I went to a meeting of the IMF a year or two ago and there was a demonstration outside and one of the banners said, "Worldwide Campaign Against Globalization." I mean, and you can see why people had written that slogan, utterly contradictory as it actually was. And we are in a world where globalization is so badly managed, the coordination between governments is now so poor, the meetings like the G20 are so empty of content that people have decided that there is no hope in international economic cooperation and have retreated into national silos as if protectionism and as if an aggressive nationalism can solve problems that are global.
No individual who knows how to build an Airbus. But 10,000 people taken together do.
People don't think globalization's working. People feel that they're losing out. Suddenly you've got this realization that the majority of production, the majority of manufacturing, the majority of trade and the majority of investment is actually outside the West.
We face a really meaningful problem if the next generation, the generation in effect currently at university or of university age, believes that socialism is preferable to capitalism.
I think you've got to look at some of the jobs that actually we need done, which are face-to-face, person-to-person, caring jobs, and see whether we actually value them properly.
In the end, the values of freedom, economic freedom and political freedom, are too well aligned with human nature for a free society to lose to an unfree one.